This year alone, we have published around 60 interviews, but this one was by far the most challenging. It felt almost cursed. Logistical problems, scheduling conflicts, last-minute surprises, and even during filming, things didn't go smoothly. But our determination and desire to meet your requests helped us get the job done. While other channels seem to interview Professor Marandi with ease, for us it was anything but simple. We went all out to meet him in person, and my trip to Tehran for the Deblock Summit turned out to be the perfect opportunity. I was on my own and had to manage the technical side of things myself, so please forgive a few challenging shots. But in the end, I believe we have created something special, an interview that goes beyond commenting on the latest headlines. It's a journey through the professor's personal story and that of his country, a conversation accompanied by footage I captured myself on the streets of Iran's capital, aiming to challenge the stereotypes that surround the anti-Iranian narrative and highlight the positive aspects of the country's path of cooperation within BRICS. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and happy viewing.
Dear friends, welcome to Think BRICS and welcome to Iran and its capital city of Tehran. My today's guest is prominent Professor Marandi. Professor, welcome to Think BRICS.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's a pleasure to see you here, to meet you here,
Thank,
and to talk to you.
thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
The pleasure is mine.
Thank you very much for your time. So, let's get started. Professor, you grew up between the United States and Iran, studied English literature and languages, and eventually you became one of the leading voices on geopolitics in Iran. How was this journey, both personal and academic, influenced your interpretation of today's East-West divide?
Well, I spent my childhood in the United States, and when the revolution was happening in Iran, I was beginning to become politically aware because my parents were both very politically active. And I noticed how the Iranians who were rising up against the Shah, who was sort of like the Arab dictatorships in the Persian Gulf now, who were just being milked by the United States. I saw how the United States, the US media, the government, they were all siding with the Shah as he was killing people on the streets and blaming the people for the revolution and attributing all sorts of negative qualities to the Iranians, being medieval, being backward, being communist. Uh, all sorts of different accusations were being made, whereas what the people wanted was the U.S. installed despot to go. And then I think was probably a key turning point in my views, because before that, when I was at school as a middle school student or an elementary school student, the history of the United States and the culture of the United States was taught to us in a very different way, very different from my experience watching media or monitoring media during the revolution, even though I was still a kid. But I think the most important turning point for me was the war where Saddam Hussein, uh, through Western support, invaded Iran, and where I survived 2 chemical attacks. And seeing how the West would provide Saddam with chemical weapons, the military intelligence to use them, and the political cover to get away with these crimes, that was a major turning point.
Okay. I see. So you have had several experiences. Let's talk a little bit about BRICS, that Iran formal accession to BRICS in 2024, just
Right.
a year ago, was a significant foreign policy development for your country. What does BRICS membership really mean to Iran, in your opinion? Mainly an opportunity for economic gains, leveraging diplomacy, or a part of a larger civilizational alignment? What do you think?
I think BRICS, as well as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, they are key organizations which Iran has joined, and both under the presidency of Dr. Raisi, the late Dr. Raisi. Um, the the objective for Iran was basically to break the stranglehold of the empire, the U.S.-led empire, which has more or less been governing the world under different Western
Yeah.
European states, and then the United States has been going on for 500 years, more or less. And the last couple of 100 years for Iran has been very difficult under Western domination. So BRICS being more economically oriented and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization being more security oriented initially,
Exactly.
they've served different purposes. However, from my understanding, both organizations are evolving and becoming somewhat more similar. In other words, more comprehensive. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is becoming more than just security, and BRICS is becoming more than just economics. But ultimately, I think the aim of both organizations is to create space for countries in the global majority where they can interact, where they can have political, social, cultural, and economic interaction without Western pressure, without Western influence, and without Western hegemony. Also, these organizations have another purpose, in my opinion, and that is that it creates an opportunity for global leaders to meet one another on the sidelines. So not only are they speaking as a whole, discussing the future, trying to develop mechanisms to create better prosperity for the people, but also it's an opportunity for leaders to speak one-on-one with one another in private settings and get to know each other better, and thus promote bilateral ties within this context of promoting multilateral relationships.
You use the term global majority. It's a new one because we often use global south. In your opinion, what is better reflects the geopolitical scene? Which term?
I think probably global majority is better because, after all, the non-Western countries are the majority, and it's not an issue of geography.
Yeah.
Russia's close to the North Pole, so it's not exactly the
Global.
country that could be called a part of the South. And the southern tip of Russia would be up higher than northern Iran. So, and also, it's the global majority stresses the fact that the overwhelming majority of humanity is non-Western, and that the West, which has monopolized power and is trying to monopolize everything, literally, the elites in the West, they do not represent humanity. And increasingly, we see that they do not represent the people in the West, because dissatisfaction across the West too is growing, and their views, or the views of ordinary Europeans and North Americans, are becoming more similar to the rest of the global majority. So the global majority is indeed an absolute
And that
majority.
term. Yeah. Thank you. Well, being here in Tehran only for 2 days, and today is my last day here, I noticed that Iran needs investment. Living under sanctions, it's not easy, not easy. And for several years, to be precise, 40 5 years Iran is living? Or correct me if I'm wrong.
The sanctions began almost immediately after the revolution and then gradually grew until they became maximum pressure sanctions under Obama. So we've been facing oil and gas sanctions since the post-war period, and maximum pressure sanctions for 2 decades now.
2 decades now. So Iran has remained under extensive sanctions for several years, but still engaged in trade, we see this, and maintained political affiliations. Do you see BRICS as a viable alternative to the Western-dominated financial order? And what might other sanctioned or isolated countries learn from Iran's experience?
Well, the Russians have already learned a great deal when the West began to sanction the people of Russia. Many Russian uh, business leaders and bankers and politicians traveled to Iran during the first year of the war, and they spoke to their Iranian counterparts so that they could learn what the Iranians gradually learned over decades, but much more rapidly. And I think it had a huge impact on the way in which the Russians dealt with the sanctions regime. Iran's experience was of great significance. Um, BRICS, of course, is still in its early stages, and so is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But I think we are moving in the right direction. And the fact that more countries have been added to the list of enemies of the West, I mean, this is a list that the West makes. None of us,
They say,
yes, none of us consider ourselves to be either the enemies of the West. They have turned us into their enemies. So, when they always speak about Iran being anti-American, Iran is against American imperialism. It's against American domination. It's against American subjugation, the subjugation of people across the world, including Iranians, by the Americans. And so that makes Iran bad and evil and
yeah,
the enemy. So now that the list has grown very large and the United States is sanctioning many other powerful countries, it creates greater space for Iran. So, for example, the Russians and the Iranians, which are both heavily sanctioned, they no longer fear investing in one another. They no longer fear working with one another due to the sanctions.
Yes.
Because they're already sanctioned. When Iran was sanctioned before the war in Ukraine, the Russians were very cautious about Iran because they didn't want to get sanctioned due to economic cooperation. Now that fear is gone. And also, since China is increasingly being targeted by the West because of its success, it too has greater incentive to work with Russia and Iran. So the list of countries that that want to find a solution where the West can no longer block business, trade, and investment is growing. And the notion of building alternative structures for commerce, for trade, payment systems, the incentive has grown dramatically. Now, is there a single solution? Will there be multiple solutions? How fast will these solutions come about? These are all open questions. But I think we are definitely moving in the right direction, and we're probably moving faster than expectations, because under Trump during the last 9 months, he's been very erratic. He's been very unpredictable. He's been targeting countries that have nothing to do with resistance against empire, whether it's South Africa, whether it's Nigeria, whether it's Venezuela, Brazil, India. He's, Greenland, he's been targeting everyone. And that, I think, is pushing the notion of BRICS becoming a influential organization to deal with global poverty, global economics, global insecurity, and the same with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The incentive for these to grow and become more influential and powerful has grown significantly and very rapidly in the past few months.
Thank you. You are right about mentioning that when Iran got hit with sanctions, Russia was very cautious about how to deal with the country under sanctions. They were probably afraid of the secondary sanctions, as you told. And now we have seen the same attitude from others towards Russia itself, because we see how countries are looking at and thinking first, twice, 3 times, 4 times if they're ready to risk to work with Russia or to be hit by sanctions. But again, I agree totally that countries, the time is changing. We see how China is moving. They say, okay, you hit Russia with sanctions, you hit Iran with sanctions. We don't care because we are the powerful country. We are strong economy. We don't care. And looking at this example, India says, okay, we do the same. And this example of how to deal with countries under sanctions will expand. So I think in nearest years, the effect of sanctions, I mean that psychological pressure on the countries from the United States will be less and less. Well, we'll see that, but
I agree. I think that this is already happening. The Chinese too were very cautious.
Yeah.
But the Chinese also recognize that if the United States succeeds with Russia, with Iran, with other countries, then China is next. And so there is a strong incentive, not just for China, but for countries across the global south, such as the BRICS nations and the Shanghai Cooperation Organizations, organization countries, to protect themselves against the threat of sanctions, the threat of secondary sanctions. So I'm optimistic. I think that a lot of psychological barriers have been broken, and there are still more psychological barriers that need to be broken. But we are moving in the right direction. Life is difficult for Iranians in many ways. I mean, if you travel around Tehran, you'll see that it's far better than people outside the country think. It's it's a very
it is.
clean city, or people go to work. It's a beautiful country. But the sanctions have had a significant impact. However, let's compare today with 20 years ago, 2 decades ago. The United States labeled Iran the axis of resistance. Back then, countries were fearful of working with Iran, the Russians, Chinese, and others. Today, the United States has labeled so many countries as evil that it is now isolating itself. So Iran is no longer alone. You have Russia, you have China, you have India, you have Brazil, all antagonized in one way or another. You have countries across the global south that are being antagonized. Just recently, again, South Africa, Venezuela. And you see countries like Brazil upset with U.S. policies. So
They raise their voice.
they're raising their voices, and that has implications. So I think that the changes that we're seeing are already having an economic impact. You do see Russian investment in Iran. You do see Iranians more interested in the Russian market. But the impact on our lives will come with a delay. So first, you have to have these new structures. You have to have this new mentality.
Policy.
And I think gradually we're going to see the results. We are already seeing the results, but people don't feel it yet. But I think that will be coming in the not so distant future. And also, we have to keep in mind that life in the West is becoming much more difficult.
It is.
People are in the past, they saw the West as in a commanding position, but now they're seeing the decline of the West and new opportunities emerging, such as through BRICS.
Yes, you're right. Like, it is for many years that also we are in Russia saw Western countries like one of their leaders told a paradise, but it is not like that. It is not like that. Now we know this. Well, being a media outlet, I cannot avoid asking about media. So you frequently show up in various Western media on YouTube and sentencing the dominant narratives, we can say that, on Iran and global South. in your opinion, what role what role do you see for both Western and BRICS media for shaping global perceptions and counter narratives regarding legitimacy?
Well, I'm uh, not often invited in Western media, and as we move forward, they invite me less and less. And I think that is a sign of how the West is so intolerant of alternative views, and how the Western establishment is becoming increasingly uh, less confident about its own position. So in the past, every now and then, I would be invited on some media outlets to speak for a few minutes, maybe for a longer period of time on some occasions. But that has gradually melted away. And I think that is itself a sign that the West no longer feels it has the luxury to be open,
Oh,
or at least to pretend to be open. And but increasingly, I am involved with alternative media, like yourself and your colleagues, and I see that their audiences are enormous,
and
and
growing.
they're growing. And increasingly, people in the West are turning away from their own media to alternative media. And I think this is excellent. This is perhaps one of the most uh, optimistic things about the situation today in the world, because we are living in very dark times. We're witnessing a Holocaust in Gaza, which is not over. The Israeli regime is slaughtering people in Lebanon on a daily basis. They're ethnically cleansing the West Bank. We see the West continuing to push for the war, the NATO inspired war in Ukraine. We see the U.S. pushing for war and tensions in Latin America, potentially Africa. These are not nice times for people across the world. But I think that the break, the break that we see of the break of this stranglehold by Western media is very welcome, and it's provides an opportunity for people to hear the reality
The reality.
and not the Western narratives and what it pretends to be reality. And people are waking up. You can see in the United States, the dramatic shift in mood towards Palestine, towards hegemony, towards imperialism. As I said, Americans and Europeans are increasingly thinking like the rest of the world. And that, I think, has a lot to do with alternative media. And that's why I think media outlets like yours have a very important and increasingly important role to play in the coming months and years.
Thank you. Um, you are right about that. People is waking up. We see it thanks to our audience, because we see comments, we see reactions, we see questions. And when people are asking questions, it means the intellectual process in their heads is moving. It means they need to know. And our goal is to bring you the truth. The truth. Because which Western media outlets often try to hide from their audience. And actually, several days ago, I saw the graphics of American main media outlets of their performance. From year to year, their audience is going down.
Despite all the money that they put into media,
Investment
in your case, you have a couple of cell phones.
Yeah.
They have all sorts of people. When they come to Iran, they come with teams. And then it's very interesting. Western journalists who come to Iran, mainstream media journalists, they go back and they write their reports or they present their documentaries, and they're usually very negative. And what is the result? Whenever we invite, for example, academics from Europe or North America, when they come to Iran, and this is not an exaggeration, many of them come with very heavy suitcases. And then when you when you ask them why is your suitcase so full, they're a bit shy and embarrassed, but it's full of food because they think like we're starving here, or there's no food here, or there's hunger, or Whereas Iran is an ordinary society, despite the maximum pressure sanctions. It's an ordinary society. Men and women go to work. They're in the metro, they're on the bus, they're in the taxis, they're in their own cars, they're moving around, they're in restaurants, they're in coffee shops like here. They're living their lives. But because of these Western media narratives
Yes.
that are produced by these very individuals who come and visit the country, this is the net result. This is the narrative that's created among elites, among academics. And when they set foot into the country, they're shocked because the reality is extremely different from what they perceive to be the reality of the country.
Well, the fresh example is me. When I told some of my friends in Europe that I'm planning to visit Iran, they told me, "Are you insane? Are you sure you want to go there? What's the question? Why? Oh, it's women abuse. Uh, and what else?
There's no freedom. People are
Exactly.
paid to attack.
There's no freedom, war, strict Muslim rules. You will not be allowed to go out." All that narrative that media, European, American media is constantly pushing to the society of their country. So that Iran is something, it's danger. Please don't go. It's considerable to avoid any contacts. But people, it's a normal, ordinary country like, I don't know how many countries we have in the world. So Iran is one of them. So we are sitting in a nice place, in a nice hotel, talking like a normal people in all countries do. So, and no one is running around me asking questions, what am I doing here? So I have seen a lot of tourists from Japan, from China, Korea, South Korea. I have seen people at breakfast.
If you travel around Tehran, you will rarely see a police car, if any. In the West and Western countries, there are policemen and women, uh, or their cars. In Iran, you don't see any. Sort of like Moscow, by the way. But the idea that they present is that this is a police state, or this is an oppressive regime, as I like to call it. But the reality is that people in Iran go around there, doing their own business. If you ask them what do you think about the government, they may attack it, they may criticize it, they may support it, they may hate the Islamic Republic of Iran, they may love it. But at the end of the day, it is a country where people are living their lives normally.
Normally.
But the demonization of Iran is so immense that, for example, I was on Piers Morgan's show a few times, and once I invited him to come to Iran because he was talking so much nonsense. And he said, "No, I'm not coming there because you'll take me hostage." And later on in another show, he literally said that you will hand me over to, like, I don't know who. Uh, this is the sort of crazy mentality that these very backward and narrow-minded people have. So they train themselves and their societies to hate Russia, to hate Iran, to hate China, to hate everyone. And they present themselves as the good guys, even though they're the ones carrying out the genocide. They're the ones who are carrying out war after war. And they've been doing so for so many decades and centuries.
Act like superior nation.
But they behave as if they're superior. But even when you invite them to the country, they insult you. This is the mentality that we're dealing with.
It's a pity to hear about that. Oh, we should be more open-minded. We are all normal people, and all people in all countries all around the world want the same thing. So the same thing when people in Iran raising children, have families, work. So the same thing when people in the United States, in UK, in France, everywhere. So we talked about the past, we talked about the nowadays. Let's look a little bit in the future. In what direction do you think Iran will head 10 years from now as BRICS is expanding and the economic blocks are reshaping? Will it turn to become a bridge between the Islamic world and the largest global south or global majority, as you told? Or will internal and internal and regional dynamics put limits on Tehran's capacity?
Well, Iran has a very highly educated society, and it also has enormous resources, not just oil and gas, but all sorts of minerals, and there's huge potential across the country. And it is a bridge. It has historically been a bridge between east, west, north, and south. The Belt and Road Initiative goes through Iran. The north-south transport corridor between Iran and Russia, of course, passes through Iran to the Persian Gulf. I think that the decade ahead will be full of challenges for everyone in the world, because the United States and the West, as their strength declines, they're becoming increasingly irrational and violent. But I think in the long run, Iran's position is so important, and Iran's uh, embracement, the fact that Iran embraces the future and has joined BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, I think that puts Iran in a very strong position. Uh, Asia is on the rise. There's no doubt about that. And regardless of what the Americans and the Europeans say, that is going to continue. Now, there may be global crises. Trump is, of course, Trump.
Will try his best.
He will try his best to wreck things for humanity, or at least the global majority. But I think that it's really beyond his control, and therefore Iran's position 10 years from now, I think, will be significantly stronger than today.
Well, I think, yes, Iran has all potential internal. First of all, the population is highly educated. So it's a mix of cultures, mix of religions here. So we see, I don't know, it's like melting pot of all the concentration of, yeah, and geographically it is at the crossroads. Iran definitely has potential, I agree. And I I hope that in nearest years the situation will change and continue changing for the better.
Well, that's why countries that are member states of BRICS have to work together, work more closely with one another to protect one another and to protect themselves from a West that is lashing out at everyone, literally.
To share technology, to share knowledge, to share the political stand one together with another. Well, with the advancement of multipolarity, what kind of global order do we want, in your opinion? Apart from a balance of power or currently, sorry, apart from a balance of power or currently a currency block that could be the common values or principles incorporated into this new system, so that the system is more human-centered, just, and sustainable. So what do you see, in your opinion, the new world, how it should be?
Well, the first thing that I think we have to always repeat, because in the West they depict the global majority as somehow being hostile and anti-Western, is that this is not about hostility towards people in the West. This is about protecting sovereignty. This is about having a level playing field, a playing field where all countries across the world can develop economically without the United States and Europeans blocking the path of countries to progress, without them imposing their will. So BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and other regional and global organizations that do not include the West are not enemies of the West. The West depicts many as their enemies, but they do want to protect themselves. What we are looking for is a world that is more just, a world where an oligarchy does not control the fate of billions of people. And sadly, the West, in both instances, is a problem. One is that there's Western hegemony, and on the other hand, there is the hegemony of oligarchs in the West. We don't want either. And I think it's to the benefit of people in Europe and the United States and North America to have a more just and benign relationship with countries across the world. It would cost them less militarily, it would benefit them economically, but the mentality in the West has to change. And until that happens, countries across the global South or the global majority or across Asia, they have to protect themselves against the West.
And to push their narratives that are human-centered, human-oriented, and not war-oriented.
Yes, and part of the project is, of course, independent media, alternative voices. As you rightly pointed out, Iran is a very diverse country. We have an Orthodox church in Tehran. We have many Armenian churches. We have synagogues. We have Zoroastrians in Iran. They are members of parliaments that are from the minorities in the country, and we have just recently one of the key metro stations that was opened was named
Just wanted
after
to mention that.
Saint Mary, and Saint Mary, a chapter in the Quran is named after her. Jesus is for Iran extremely dear, and these are all signs that the Western narrative of Iran is lacking, to say the least. But it is, to be blunt, utterly dishonest and motivated by an attempt to marginalize and isolate whoever stands up against Western imperialism, Western hegemony, Western domination. If Iran were to give up the people of Gaza, our problems with the United States would diminish. If the Iranians would say, yes, we are willing to be like Erdogan or like General Sisi or like other countries where the United States has the final say, then obviously the United States would have no problem with Iran. And so I think that the reason why countries like Iran, countries like Russia, among others, are increasingly antagonized is because we want our sovereignty, we want a level playing field, and we have ideas that are different from that of the West, and the West has to learn to tolerate them.
And we should defend our right to live like we want, not like we cold.
Exactly. It's not all that complicated.
But in the end, it is. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much. I hope next time to see you in Moscow, and you are always welcome to be a guest of our channel. I'm definitely sure that our subscribers will appreciate our today's conversation.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I hope you enjoyed the rest of your stay in Iran, and I hope to see you in Moscow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.